How are y'all doing today? Good. Incredible event. So a lot of people complain about writer's block, where you want to build something, but you're not quite sure what to build. Well, when I was young, I had the reverse case. I had to build absolutely anything and everything. And it was almost a case of the harder it was, the more I had to go and build it right now. And people would tell me things are impossible to build yourself, or only industry can do it, and that was only more reason to try to build it myself. And I would be welding things all day, I'd be making steam engines, turbine engines, freeze dryers, liquefying metals and making my own mirrors, all sorts of high vacuum experiments, X-ray machines. And 1 month, I used an entire megawatt hour of electricity. And a megawatt hour of electricity is one of those things that's really easy to Google and see, okay, how many kilograms of coal does it take to make a megawatt hour? How long can I run a light bulb for with a megawatt hour? And I thought, wow, what if I'm the problem with the world? Am I the reason that the world keeps heating up? Am I releasing all of this CO2, burning all of this energy, and a part of the problem? And how am I going to keep building things and doing what I love if I can't use more energy and feel good about it? And I immediately started thinking, well, there must be a better way to make energy. And obviously that is not an easy problem to solve. Like, we use fossil fuels. The whole world uses fossil fuels, and it's one of the hardest things to actually crack. And it's actually slowing the world down. Like, we're using all of this power, but it's not enough. We're not growing as fast as we were before the 1970s. We used a lot more power a lot faster then. And it's really holding things back. And one option would be solar panels, right? Instead of burning fossil fuels, just put a solar panel down and it makes energy from the sun. But the problem with solar panels is it gets dark at night, and they stop working. So you have to look at something else, right? Maybe wind power. And wind power is kind of solar power with extra steps. The sun heats up different areas differently, and it creates wind, but that's even less reliable than just sunlight. Geothermal is great, but it only works where the lithosphere is thin, and that is not everywhere. So it's great in some locations, like Iceland, but not other locations. A lot of other renewables actually don't have enough power to power our current energy demands. It's like hydroelectric power or wave energy can't meet our current demands, so they're not really an option for the whole world. And nuclear is a great option. We should build nuclear power plants everywhere we can, but it takes a while to build a nuclear power plant, and it's difficult to scale that into every nation on Earth, especially nations that you don't really trust with uranium. So that's a problem. And then what people usually bring up at this time is fusion power, and it's always about 20 years away, and it's really difficult. And everybody says fusion's the future, and we need to work on it. So I built a fusion reactor in high school, and in building the fusion reactor, I realized that the sun is much better at fusion than we may ever be. I mean, this giant ball of hydrogen is constantly fusing atoms together, and it's really efficient at it. And we are trying to fuse atoms together on this tiny little circle right here. Like, you cannot push things hard enough with gravity here as you can with the sun. And because of that, we have to do fusion in a different way. And it's never as efficient as what the sun does, or it may never be as efficient. We'll keep trying. I think it's definitely worth the research, but we spent $100 billion on it, and it's taking a long time, so we should look to something else. And the sun is great. Like, solar really would be the best form of energy. Every second, the sun makes 5,000 times more energy than humanity has ever consumed. And we're so good at building solar farms. So this is a graph of what we expect to install in solar panels around the world and what we actually installed. So reality has constantly outpaced our predictions of how much solar we're going to build around the world. And we are building these solar farms absolutely everywhere. And what really matters with solar farms is how much sunlight they're receiving. So the solar panels are the receiver stations of sunlight. And where the sunlight is falling depends on where you are on Earth. You get 3 times more sunlight in the Sahara Desert than you get in a place like Germany or Europe. And there was actually this project that was proposed a few years ago that wanted to build solar farms in the Sahara Desert and then ship the power to Europe with power lines. And it was going to cost about $40 billion. But that was the first time it really got into my head, like, wait, moving sunlight from one place to another could be worth something. If you move sunlight, it's worth $40 billion. And I saw sunlight as a product for the first time ever. And sunlight is one of those weird things where it's like, okay, this is a valuable thing that has the potential to power the world, but we don't have a way to move it. And if we could find a way to move it, it would be like irrigation. It would be like discovering the ability to move water and keep a farm growing even when it's not raining. Just like with sunlight, you could power a solar farm even when it's not naturally sunny. And, well, light travels 13.8 billion years, and we still see it in our telescope, so light can definitely move around. It's incredibly efficient. And bouncing light off of a mirror is also incredibly efficient. You lose almost no energy when you reflect sunlight off of a mirror. And, not to brag, but I worked at SpaceX in 2016, so I knew that it was pretty easy to get things into space, and that we're building more and more rockets every day. And, space is where sunlight is kind of infinite. That's where the sun is, right? And we have all these rocket companies building all of these rockets, and they need more products to launch, and we're getting so much better at building satellites. And then one day, on a run, I put it all together, and I realized that you can put a mirror in space and reflect sunlight down onto the dark side of the Earth. So just using a normal mirror, this actually should be slightly transparent, but just using a normal mirror, you can reflect sunlight from space down onto little spots on Earth. And the Russians, obviously, the Russians are always beating us at things. They actually did this in 1992, and they launched a large 20-meter reflector into space. And back then, there was only about 200 megawatts of solar around the world. So they saw this as a lighting market, not an energy market. And a lot of people have attempted space solar since then. Most of the ideas involve a large, giant solar panel and then beaming the power down with microwaves. We're doing it a bit differently. We're using essentially potato chip bags with slightly better plastic. It's just some shiny, thin plastic. You put that into a mirror when you pull it tight, and then reflecting that sunlight down onto existing solar farms. So we don't have to build the ground stations. With the microwave power beaming, you have to do that. And then our satellites are also a lot simpler. So we kind of take a rapid building and testing approach where we make lots of things really quickly. Like, I come from that world with my previous builds and kind of came up with this concept to put a lot of just very simple satellites in orbit around the Earth in these rings and then beam sunlight down onto the existing solar farms. So the thing with this is you need to get enough power to a solar farm in order to actually turn it on. So one satellite is a certain amount of brightness, but you want to condense the sunlight. You want to get enough energy to match full noon power. And you can do that with a bunch of these small flat mirrors all working like a parabola. And basically each satellite is just pointing at the solar farm on the ground, and you can deliver more power. And it works just like this. You just keep adding more satellites, and the spot keeps getting brighter. And each one of those spots is about as bright as the palm. It's about 5 kilometers in diameter. And when you're in the spot, it's going to be bright, but when you're outside of the spot, you'll just see the light on the ground, unless you're looking directly at the satellite on purpose. And we can put that 5-kilometer spot anywhere within an 800-kilometer diameter circle. So anywhere within that red circle, we can put our sunlight. And we can move it from one place to another within 30 seconds, just by rotating the satellite. It's basically like if you're out here and you're just pointing a hand mirror around, you're basically just moving that 5-kilometer spot. And it's that very precise spot. And when you're not in the spot, you won't see the satellite. So the satellite it's very direct, like all of the light is going down there, and you won't actually see the star unless you're in the spot looking up. And when you're flying over a place that you don't want to see any light at all, you can just rotate the satellite and reflect all the sunlight away from the Earth. So we can operate a very large constellation of these satellites without bothering people, without blinding folks. And we can light up one spot and not another spot. So the business model is quite simple. We're selling a resource. We're not building the rockets. SpaceX handles that. But they will launch our satellites. We go into orbit, and then we sell the sunlight to customers. And there's a variety of business models for this. When you're serving energy, it'll be a completely different thing. And there's even several different business models with energy. But really, we're mining sunlight, we're distributing it to customers, and then working with customers to figure out what model makes the most sense for them. Yeah, so the concept was ready to be tested. So I had done all this work. I had realized that this is a thing that's actually worth building. And the next step was to test it on Earth with the biggest mirror we could and get it high up. So we put an 8-foot by 8-foot Mylar mirror on the bottom of a hot air balloon, and we reflected sunlight down onto my friend, who had a measurement device, so we measured the irradiance. And then we also reflected sunlight down onto a small solar farm, and we measured the power. And on this graph, we did a square wave where we would turn it on for a little bit and then turn it off and then turn it on and then turn it off. And we were able to deliver very clear, measurable power. The graph's a little shaky because the hot air balloon is moving around a bit, but in space, things are quite smooth. But yeah, so this test was quite good. And then we raised a seed round from Sequoia Capital in April, and that's enough to build our first satellite. So we don't actually like to say satellite, we like to say first 100 square meters, because really it's about the amount of square meters of satellites that you have in space, because they're all working together and it's flexible, so you can kind of ignore the fact that they're satellites and just talk about the square meters of Reflector. So we're launching our first 100 as soon as possible. And we're launching this satellite, and we were thinking, okay, this is kind of like breaking even on fusion for the first time. This is going to be a big deal for the world. The first time anybody has seen something like this. I wonder if people want to buy it. Like, I wonder who wants to try it first. And, you know, you can think of like 50 people to call up, but really you're not going to see the world. Like, this is a global solution. We're flying around the entire Earth. We need to hear from customers exactly what they want. So we released a 15-second video on Twitter, and it got 55 million views across a bunch of reposts, and it was all over X and all sorts of places. And we ended up with 260,000 applications for our sunlight in just a couple of months from all around the world. And it was honestly incredible. We didn't expect anybody to really care about this. And people were saying ideas that we hadn't even thought about. A lot of people want to capture a moment in history with us. This is the first time that humanity is gaining control over the sun. It's on the scale of irrigation, like when we learned how to control water and move it around so we didn't have to wait for it to rain. We're doing that with sunlight for the first time. We're putting a joystick on the sun. If it's dark out, you can now get sunlight. That's impossible today. It's going to be possible when we launch the satellite. And that's going to be a big historic moment that people may talk about for a long time, especially if this becomes something that we use for millions of years. So, you know, there's some excitement there. A lot of people will also use this to curb seasonal depression. We got a lot of applications from Scandinavia, and, you know, if you're in a valley and it's wintertime, you're not getting very much daylight. So, you know, you spend a lot of time in the darkness, and people struggle with depression up there. And a lot of people even just leave entirely for a couple months in the winter so that they can feel some sunlight. Well, with us, you won't have to leave your home in the winter because it's too dark. You can just purchase some sunlight and get some more daylight. And, you know, some people reached out and they said, hey, I have this giant construction project and we can't work at night. So if you would allow us to work at night, it'll be moving twice as fast. And we got a number of those. And we got a number of people who are like, you know, we work at night, but we do it with diesel lighting towers and generators that we constantly have to fuel up. And everybody hates that. It takes forever to fuel them up, and they're really expensive to keep running. So, you know, they can just call us down. They can say, hey, here's my construction project, and we can light it up. And we are dimmable from full moon to full noon, depending on how many satellites you want. So we can work with, you know, any OSHA requirements or anything. Or if you just need a small amount of sunlight for security lighting, we can do that as well. You know, we got interest from mines at night. You know, if you're mining, you have this mining truck, you have the headlights. It's hard to see very far. With us, you know, you can light up the whole area. You can have better situational awareness. You can know if the giant, you know, geological feature that you're mining on is going to fall or not because you're able to see it. Mining at night right now is quite a dangerous activity. And a couple weeks ago, there was that plane crash in Washington, D.C., and there was actually somebody on TV talking about how they weren't able to see well enough at night. And it was making the rescue very difficult. And we actually got a number of customers mentioning that, you know, they're doing a rescue operation, and as soon as it goes dark, it becomes much more difficult, and sometimes it takes another 18 hours. So with us, you can just call sunlight down. And it really is just going to be as easy as using an app. If you're in a green zone, that's an approved location to receive sunlight, you just, you know, press the button and it'll come right down there. If you're in a red zone, obviously we won't serve you there, so, you know, we'll be doing this responsibly, but for, you know, critical applications, it's a game changer. And within 30 seconds, you can call in this light. It's even faster than a helicopter over a much larger area. Interestingly, we didn't even know that there are some people who grow dragon fruit with lights all over the field. And they do that to simulate the different seasons. So you can change when plants go to flower or go to seasons. You can increase growing seasons, even with a tiny amount of sunlight. When we had thought about agriculture before, we thought we would have to basically match the sun and just fully power on plants with photosynthesis, but actually just a small amount of sunlight is enough to change when plants flower. So it's a huge opportunity, much earlier than we expected. And our satellites are quite significantly different than normal street lights. So with street lights, you have, you know, a street light, you're trying to get like about 3 lux in between the street lights, right? But right under the street light, it's 20 lux. It's very bright light, and lux is a measurement of the brightness of the light. So what you're getting with street lights is this very uneven lighting. And especially if your street lights don't have shades on the sides, which a lot don't, you're lighting up a huge amount of area around the street light. So usually when you look at a city off in the distance and you see that sky glow, you're seeing all the light, you're seeing the light bulbs directly, you're seeing all the light that's going up, and all the light that isn't making it to the ground. And even when you do make the light to the ground, you know, in between street lights, the light drops pretty dramatically. So with us, we're an entirely different technology. We light up the entire area evenly, just to that 3 lux. So it's actually much darker, so it's likely that this is going to be, you know, a drastic reduction in sky glow for large cities. And the other cool thing is we're not LEDs, you know, we're not trying to fake sunlight or get as close to it as possible. We are reflecting basically just real sunlight. It's within 5% of the sunlight curve because it's reflected off of aluminum. So it's incredibly healthy, warm light that is going to inspire you. It's not going to give you the like staticky feeling when you look at normal streetlights. It's going to be very smooth, very natural sunlight. And so that was quite exciting. And then obviously for energy, we have huge applications. So if you have a giant billion-dollar solar farm and you want to get clean, reliable power out of it, you have to install a giant battery. And you have to charge the battery during the day, so you have to install even more solar panels to charge that battery during the day. So what you end up with is this lower graph where you're building tons of solar. The solar installed is the yellow graph, and then the green is the batteries. And you have to build so much solar to charge those batteries, especially in the wintertime. This is kind of summer versus winter. In the winter, like you have so much less sunlight, and you really have to size the farm for that. We completely changed that. So our upper graph has so much less installed solar for the same consistency of power delivered and the same power delivered. So it's a much better solution for solar farms because you don't have to deal with the day-night cycle anymore. You can call in sunlight at night, and it just completely reduces the amount of solar panels, land, and batteries that you need to install. You still want some batteries, obviously. They definitely do help, but it completely changes the game with solar. And this is kind of just the beginning. So, Germany found out that you can only get about like 30% wind and solar on the grid before it becomes more unreliable, and you need to fill in the gaps in demand with natural gas peaker plants. But with us, you can go a lot higher than 20 or 30% wind and solar. You can go all the way up to like 70 or 80% wind and solar, mostly solar, with our technology because we're making solar more consistent. Theoretically, with enough satellites, all you're dealing with is clouds. So clouds are in the way about 20% of the time, but in some locations, they're only in the way like 5% of the time. In those regions, you can just have a solar panel on the ground, and it'll just be powering things, basically forever. So it's quite a bit different than the current solar that we have today. And obviously, this has gigantic markets. We kind of lump all the smaller markets into the lighting market, and then obviously the solar goes into the energy market. And then, none of these are small markets. So those are kind of the markets that we're, the piece that we're predicting, but obviously these are huge pieces of the global economy. And, we have the potential to change a lot of them. I think even potentially more than we're expecting. Like, we're basically opening up the entire back half of the Earth, if you want it. And yeah, so we're kind of going from a type 1 civilization where we're using all the power on the Earth. We're finding things, we're digging up oil, we're digging up different materials, and we're burning it. And then we are kind of the first step in the direction of becoming a type 2 civilization, where we're not actually interested in burning things on Earth. We're not actually interested in damaging our earthly environment for materials. We can just get all that energy from the sun. And it's something that can last a lot longer than just digging up things on Earth. Like, everybody talks about like, oh, how long are the fossil fuels going to last? Well, I'll tell you one thing, they're not going to last a million years. The sun is going to last millions of years, even billions of years. Like, actually, the Earth will die in a couple million years, and the sun will last longer than that because the sun will consume the Earth. Like, it is just on a completely different scale. And when you compare how long humans have been around, like, we've been burning fossil fuels for, a couple hundred years, right? That is nothing in comparison to how long the dinosaurs lived. They lived for like, 60 million years or something like that, from the Cretaceous to the Jurassic. And like, this is the kind of thing that can last us that long as a species. I think when people are concerned about energy, they know that it's not secure right now. Like, our energy is not going to last a million years. With the sun, it can. So with that, the future is going to be a lot better than you expected. You're not going to have to worry about burning energy anymore. It's just going to be like one of those things that you just, we'll just launch more satellites. Like, we'll get it from the sun. It'll last forever. You don't have to have that kind of fear. So that's what I'm most excited about with this technology. Thank you.